It had been 2 months since Barry's boiler test, and summer had come to the island of Sodor. All the engines were busy. There were plenty of tourists visiting the island this summer, and extra passenger trains had to be put on to accommodate them all. The engines didn't mind. They knew all these visitors were good for the railway. One morning, James arrived at Croven's gate with one of those extra trains.
"Morning, Peter Sam,"
he said as he brought the train into the station. "Morning, James. I see you've brought us some more visitors."
"Yes,"
James replied. He glanced over.
"I've noticed your railway's getting a few of them, too."
"Yes, Duncan's not too happy about it." James chuckled.
"Just remind him it's good for the railway."
"Oh, it's not that. He's annoyed that you'll be getting extra help soon, while we aren't." James frowned.
"What do you mean?"
"That engine being restored in your works has been doing test runs for the last couple of days, although he said he only goes as far as Kelsthorpe Road." James grinned, glad to hear that Barry was back on his wheels.
"Oh, he's not going to be staying here," James explained. "He's going to be going to his heritage railway once his restoration's been completed."
"Yes, he mentioned that, although we've heard a rumour that your controllers asked him to stay on, to help with the summer rush."
"I haven't heard that,"
James said, surprised. He'd have to ask the other engines about it. A moment later, the guard's whistle sounded out, and James set off. He was soon making good time, but about halfway between Croven's Gate and Kelsthorpe Road, James began feeling very thirsty indeed.
"Driver, I need more water," he said.
In his cab, James's fireman glanced from one gauge to the other. "You've got plenty of water in your tender, James. It's just not reaching your boiler," he said. James knew what that meant. His injector, which fed the water from his tender to his boiler, had failed.
"Bother!"
he exclaimed as he brought the train to a halt. His fireman dumped his fire. James's driver came up to the red engine.
"Driver, what about the passengers?" "Don't worry, the guard's going to get help."
Meanwhile, James's guard had reached the signal box and explained the situation to the signalman.
"There's a light engine due through in a few minutes. The signal's already set, so he should stop a few yards down the line,"
the signalman said. "Thank you," replied the guard. The guard headed down the line. A few moments later, the soft beat of an approaching steam engine drifted through the air. An unfamiliar black shape came into view. The guard frowned slightly as the engine drew nearer. Then he caught sight of the number 78018 painted crisply on the cab sides. Smoothly and gently, Barry stopped next to where the guard was waiting and looked over curiously.
"Is something wrong?"
he asked. "James has broken down up ahead, and we can't leave his passengers stranded. Can you help?"
"I'm not entirely sure. I mean, this is a test run,"
Barry replied. "Do you think you could, Barry?" said a familiar voice. Looking over, the guard saw Sir Charles Topham Hatt leaning out of Barry's cab.
"I think I could, sir. It would be nice to pull a proper train again."
"All right, but we'll have to take it easy. You'd better climb aboard, guard." The guard did so, and Barry moved off. Meanwhile, James was getting worried. He could hear the murmur of increasingly annoyed passengers coming from his coaches, and he hoped help would arrive soon. Suddenly, an unfamiliar whistle sounded out through the air.
"James, it's Barry here. I'm going to push your train to the next station."
Barry buffered up to the back of James's train. The guard quickly climbed back into the last coach and blew his whistle.
"Ready when you are, Barry."
"Let's go,"
Barry said enthusiastically, and he began pushing the train forward. "Don't push yourself too hard, Barry," Sir Topham said from his cab. "Don't forget, you're still on a test run." Heeding the former Fat Controller's advice, Barry slowly brought the train up to speed. The newly restored engine couldn't help grinning as he headed along the line. It felt good, he thought, to be useful again. They soon reached Kelsthorpe Road, and Barry brought the train to a gentle stop at the platform. While the passengers disembarked, Barry chuffed up alongside James.
"Thank you for rescuing me,"
James said gratefully.
I'm glad I was able to help,
Barry replied. James looked closely at the other engine. With his rebuilt body and fresh paint, James found it hard to believe that Barry was the same scrapyard wreck he'd taken to the works just a few months ago.
"Are you feeling better?"
he asked, recalling Barry's rather sad state when he'd first arrived.
Physically, yes,
the other engine replied. Before James could ask any more, Sir Charles Topham had stepped around in front of the two engines. "James, your driver tells me that he won't be able to mend your injector. You'll have to go to the works." James's face fell. He knew the railway couldn't afford to be without him, especially not when they were this busy. Then he remembered what Peter Sam had told him.
"Sir, is it true that Barry will be helping us with the summer tourists?"
Sir Topham blinked. "Where did you hear that?"
"Oh, it's a rumour that's going round, sir."
Sir Topham said thoughtfully. "It's a good idea, James. What do you think, Barry?"
Oh, I'd be happy to help, sir. I mean, your railway has done a lot for me.
I'll speak to Stephen. After all, that was quite an impressive performance, getting this train here.
Thank you, sir,
Barry replied modestly. We'd better start by getting this train to Knapford, Sir Topham said. While he made arrangements with the guard and station master, Barry shunted James onto the branch line platform.
"Good luck,"
James called, as Barry backed down onto the train.
Thank you,
Barry replied, as the guard's whistle sounded out. Barry made good time along the line. He wanted to work hard, to make up for lost time, but his driver held him back. "Steady on, old boy," his driver said. "You're still running in." Barry soon completed his journey and brought the train smoothly into Knapford station. From the other platform, Oliver looked over.
"Hello, you're Barry, aren't you? I'm Oliver."
Pleased to meet you, Oliver.
Oliver glanced over at Barry's coaches, and the grateful passengers climbing out of them.
"I haven't seen you around here before. Is this your first run?"
My first proper run, yes, although it only started out as a test run,
Barry said, and he explained about James's breakdown.
"I see,"
Oliver said. He smiled at the other engine.
"It feels good, doesn't it? Feeling the rails running under your wheels again."
Were you saved from scrap too?
"Yes, although I wasn't in the scrapyard as long as you were. Just for a day, really. It's a bit of a long story,"
Oliver replied. But before Oliver could tell it, the Fat Controller strode over from where he, Mike Weston, and Sir Topham Hatt had been having a discussion. "Barry, your volunteers have agreed that you can help out for a few days."
I'm looking forward to it, sir.
The Fat Controller chuckled. "In that case, you'd better head to the yard. Your next train will be a slow goods. Diesel will give you your trucks."
Yes, sir,
Barry said eagerly. He was uncoupled from the coaches, and with a cheerful whistle, shuffled off to collect his next train. Later that night, Barry joined the other engines in the sheds. He'd had a busy day, taking care of all of James's trains. He'd enjoyed himself immensely. It was good to be pulling trains again. Henry, Gordon, and Diesel looked over curiously as Barry stopped next to them. They'd heard about him from James and Alice, but it was the first chance they'd had to speak to him. Alice performed the introductions.
You must be relieved to be here, after sitting in that scrapyard for so long,
Gordon commented.
Scrapyard?
Oh, yes, rather, Barry replied, slightly startled.
I understand I'm not the first rescued engine to come here.
That's right. Douglas and Oliver were also rescued, as well as me.
Barry smiled.
It seems your controllers share my volunteers' taste for rescuing engines.
I understand you're going to be going to a heritage railway after here, Barry? Bear asked. Barry smiled and started telling the other engines about the volunteers and the heritage railway he'd be going to. They spoke for a few hours, then Henry needed to leave to take the flying kipper. Conversation died down after that, but as silence fell over the shed, some of the other engines couldn't help feeling a little bit worried. Barry's reaction to Gordon's comment about the scrapyard hadn't gone unnoticed.